Today on Till We Make It, let's talk about crowds, cameras, and the technique known as working the 180. I'm Mike Quackenbush, this is Till We Make It, and today I want to talk a little bit about the juggling act we have to do in the ring when dividing our attention between the live crowd and the cameras that are capturing our performance. I'll bet the majority of the pro wrestling matches you perform are organized with traditional 3-act structure, and if that's the case, then you already know that the tempo, the pacing as Act 2 becomes Act 3 and heads toward the climax is essential to getting the right reaction from the live crowd. But sometimes we make a mistake in interrupting the urgency that we have built as we're headed toward the climax because we pause at the wrong moments to acknowledge either the live crowd or the cameras. So how can we make sure that we're continuing to engage the crowd without losing the urgency that we've created? So let me paint a little bit of a picture for you. Imagine this, that you have begun your comeback, and it could be something very simple. You come exploding off of the ropes with a shoulder tackle, and then you bump your opponent a second time with a clothesline, and that last time you deliver a drop kick so that they hear the sound of the bump. It sounds like a fireworks factory, and everybody knows the most exciting part of the match is dead ahead. We're on an upward trajectory toward the climax and potentially the finish of the bout. So after we've done that and we've started to increase the tempo, you could, in that moment, after that third movement, the drop kick, you could stop, acknowledge the camera, or you could do a bit of crowd work in that moment. But if you do this before you attempt to win the match, you will lose that urgency. So instead, to ensure that urgency isn't lost, you could run that exact same comeback. You explode off the ropes with a big shoulder tackle, and then you bump your opponent a second time with a clothesline before you place that dropkick beautifully to send them crashing to the mat a third and final time. But instead of pausing there to acknowledge the camera or the crowd, that's when you need to remind the audience of your need to win by jumping on top and trying to hold their shoulders down for the count of 3 or grabbing a hold so that you can make them submit. So the moves that I chose did not change at all. I'm still talking about a shoulder tackle and a clothesline and a dropkick in this particular example. And I don't have to do them any faster to create a sense of urgency. But I do need to remind the audience that I am trying to win first and foremost. So I attempt to end the match. And then, after they kick out at the count of 2, if I want to acknowledge the camera or I want to make a gesture to the live audience, that's where I'm going to place that character work. And if you are hearing this and you're thinking to yourself, well, Mike, how do I know which to prioritize? Am I prioritizing the camera or am I prioritizing the live audience? I want to explain to you a theory I have about the difference between professional wrestling and sports entertainment. Although sports entertainment and professional wrestling have a lot of shared skills, if we made a Venn diagram, that shared area would run pretty deep. There are some differences between these two disciplines, and here's one way that you can look at it that I happen to like. Sports entertainment prioritizes cameras. Professional wrestling prioritizes the live audience. So you need to ask yourself, what are we making here? Are we making a television product? Because if so, that might mean what you're actually doing is sports entertainment. Or is your main priority to entertain the live audience more so than create an end product that will be watched later on? Because if so, then your priority might be the live audience. Please understand, I'm not here to vilify the sports entertainment industry. Not at all. I just want to clarify what the difference is. And the sports entertainment industry creates a product, which is a television show. In those instances, it is almost certainly going to be the case that the number of people watching at home greatly exceeds the number of people in any auditorium or arena watching it live. It is for this exact reason why sports entertainers need to prioritize the cameras over the live audience, because there's a far larger audience watching at home on those screens than there are in the seats, seeing it all go down in the moment. And no matter which you choose to prioritize, whether it's the cameras or it's the live crowd, know that you're always striking some kind of balance, even if one gets prioritized far greater over the other. It is a non-stop juggling act that you've got to try and maintain. You can't ignore one entirely, so you've got to try and find a balance that works for you based on the priorities of the show you are on. If your main priority is to service the cameras, it is important that you know this. Does the promotion frown upon you looking directly into the camera? Some companies do not want that, others don't mind. And once you know that, you're also going to have to figure out where in the room hard camera is oriented and how many roving cameras you're going to have to take into account when designing your match, because everything is going to be blocked according to the needs of those cameras. Conversely, if you're chiefly interested with the live crowd and are prioritizing that, I want to share with you a technique called working the 180, which will allow you and the person that you are performing with to engage the audience. During the parts of the match where it is critically important that you have the attention of the audience, like for example when you are selling during the heat, that's a great time to deploy working the 180, but it's something that you need to understand every bit as well as your opponent understands it. Otherwise, it will not work. In those venues where the audience is sat around the ring a full 360 degrees, not minding of course for the narrow aisle where you might be making your entrance, you will be able to work the 180, but not in those instances where the audience is sat only on one side of the ring, or even if they're only sat on two sides of the ring, because you and your opponent are going to work 180 degrees opposite of each other in terms of audience engagement. So if we have a wrestling ring that is surrounded 360 degrees by the audience, and my opponent and I decide that during the heat we're going to work 180 degrees opposite from each other, when I'm selling, I might choose to show my face and shine out my pain to the section of the audience that's over here, and my opponent is going to go over here to make sure that they are engaging the audience opposite me at all times. And as we work, we're just going to constantly stay 180 degrees opposite from each other. This will be interrupted constantly because if I'm the babyface, my heel will return to me, they'll give me another move, another strike, another throw of some kind. They'll give me impetus to continue selling, and then I will simply change which side of the audience I am emoting toward. And this is not strictly the domain of singles matches. This works beautifully in tag team matches as well. It's a great way to make sure that everyone in the audience is following the action and paying attention before you decide to go to that key turning point, the hot tag. When I am working with a patient performer who likes to work the 180, between the two of us, we can make certain that we have got the entire audience engaged before we move on to the next act or portion of our match. And that's really important. We don't want to be out there working up a sweat and taking tons of bumps if people aren't ready to pay attention. And that could be happening for any number of reasons. There could be something going on out in the audience that's distracting them. Or maybe the material that we've put on stage has failed to grab their attention. And if you're looking for a tip on what you can do when you do look out over the audience and see that there are chunks of the audience that are not paying attention, and you're doing all the right things, you're showing your face, you're emoting that pain out to them, you might be making physical appeals by reaching out toward the audience, and they just aren't responding, this is often a call to shake things up. Don't be afraid to go outside the box a little bit, quite literally. Maybe you tumbling into the audience is the exact thing that they need to be woken up. Maybe the action has got to spill outside of the ring in the direction of a side of the audience not paying as much attention so that you can grab them and make sure you've woken them up. When I'm wrestling an opponent that is astute enough to work the 180, often when we get back together for the next strike, the next move, the next hold, whatever that thing might be, that's when we're going to trade notes. Hey, did you notice that to the left, nobody's paying attention to us? Or everyone in the second row is on their phone right now? We've got to do something to grab their attention. That's great. That is the mark of a real professional, when you can take in what's happening out in the audience and adjust on the fly so that your performance re-engages the members of the audience that you've lost. And unless we're running out of time and the referee is screaming at us to hurry up and take it home, I always take that extra minute to make sure we've got every side of the audience with us before we move on to that next important act of the match. Working the 180 is the kind of thing that you can absolutely work on in practice. And I'm curious to know, is it the kind of thing you deploy regularly during your performances? Drop me a comment below and let me know about your experience working the 180 and how it relates to the audience engagement that you observe. And if you've been enjoying the content that we're making here, but need something further when it comes to performative and structural elements, then please check out my book, 7 Keys to Becoming a Better Performer. A book for fellow pro wrestlers is available right now in audio form from the fine folks over at audible.com. You'll find that it's been narrated by me. Otherwise, head over to Amazon.com where they'll digitally send a copy right to your mobile device, or otherwise drop a physical copy right on your front doorstep in a matter of days if you've got that sweet, sweet Amazon Prime.